In this session, I interpret verses 13, where Rumi says that his love for divine is similar to the love for Layla and Majnun. And he says that this way of love, or like this path to love, is going to be very dangerous and also difficult. So I read this in Persian before I go any further. He says, نی حدیث راه پرخون می کند، قصه های عشق مجنون می کند. So let's first talk about Layla and Majnun and how that can be related to the Rumi's love for divine or his essence and joining his essence. Layla and Majnun is a fairy tale story where it was written by Nizami Ganjavi in 12th century. It's long before Shakespeare writes his story of Romeo and Juliet. So in that story that Nizami Ganjavi tells about Layla and Majnun, he's saying that in 7th century, a boy and a girl were in love from the childhood. But the girl was coming from a much richer family, whereas the boy, who was Majnun, he was just a poet, which wasn't as rich. So at that time, being together meant that they had to get married, and they had to oblige by the social norms of that time, where rich girls would be only marrying people from the same social status. So she wasn't allowed to marry Majnun, although they were extremely in love with each other. So that became very difficult for them, and although Majnun was not allowed to see Layla, or Layla, which in English they say Layla, in Persian poetry they call it Layli, in the poems of Nizami Ganjavi. So the devotion didn't stop. So no matter what the obstacle was between them, the family not letting them to be together, still their love for unity for each other and for uniting with each other was the same. So see what is Rumi saying about you being in love with your divine and with your essence, while your ego comes between you and it. So that is kind of example. So what happened to them was that Layla was obliged to marry to somebody of the same social status. So she got married actually to somebody else while being in love with Majnun. And although Layla was committed to her husband, she was still in love with Majnun, where Majnun himself, after he heard the story that his love got married to somebody else, he decided to leave the town and go and live in a desert. And through being alone and solitude, he found more peace. So they being in love, they got separated, but still they were extremely in love. Eventually what happened was that Layla's husband passed away. And you would think that she could immediately unite with Majnun, but no, according to the 7th century social norm, she had to mourn for her husband at least for 2 years before she was allowed to see somebody else. But before the 2 years was up, Layla died, and Majnun got very sad. He heard the news and went to the grave of Layla and realized that the only way that they can unite together is for him waiting to die, and after that in the other life they go together as united. So you see how difficult and challenging was the story of the Layla and Majnun being reunited together. And that is when, that's why Rumi is saying that the story of my love for you, God or divine, is the same as Layla and Majnun. So how can they be similar? They can be similar in a way that although for Layla and Majnun the things that got them separated was social norm, for Rumi and for us also the social norm can be things that are between us and reaching our essence and being enlightened. Our ego can be a big obstacle and separating us from our essence, where our ego is trying to say that we are different to others, we have to be better, we have to worry about what's going to happen in the future, we have to worry about our social status, about what our other people, our neighbor, our friends think about us. These are the things that are between us and reaching our essence and divine. The thing that on a day-to-day activity is worrying us is all our ego, putting fear in us on what's going to happen in the future. That separates us from our essence and from where we want to get to. And that is a very difficult journey. So the difficulty of the journey for Rumi was the social norms, and for us are the same. The other thing, similarity that Rumi has with his love, which is essence and divine, and Layla and Majnun had for each other, is being able to surround themselves to the love. Rumi completely surrounded himself. He completely said no to all social norms, although all of his followers wanted him to kind of follow his old path. But with his new spiritual finding, despite all of these difficulties, he went through with it. He said no to all these materialistic gains, and he tried to reach his essence. And that's the same for Layla and Majnun. Despite huge obstacle of social norm, despite the fact that she was married to somebody else, still their love persisted, even after Layla or Layli died. So from a more modern example, let's see if it is actually applicable to our modern life. Of course, it is through the examples that I demonstrated, but a more recent example is the story of Tenzin, who was a girl who was living in a very small and remote village in Himalaya. At that time, Tenzin, like other kids, was not allowed to go to study because that was not available for the kids. Kids were only supposed to go and work and do really cheap labor. But she had passion for studying and learning things and also teaching others. And of course, when you go as a kid in that environment to your parents and others saying that I want to learn, I want us children to grow and learn more. We want to be kind of on the same page with the rest of the world. And there is a huge social obstacle saying, no, you're not allowed. You are a kid. You have to work here. This is just a small village in Himalaya. We don't have the luxury of you going and studying. But she had this hope, the hope of unity to what she wanted, the passion for success, and the passion for her to grow. So what she did, she went and did self-study. She learned, and also she started teaching the kids that were younger than her. That started kind of making her grow and her community grow, especially the community of the kids. And then after a while, she got known by others from other parts of the country, by other parts of the world, and people from all around the world went to that village and started educating the kids. And then they started making the education institute bigger and bigger and bigger. So isn't that a very inspiring story? Isn't that similar to the Rumi's story, the Layla and Majnun story? They have obstacles to reaching to something that is very meaningful for them. Tenzin was also thinking about not only herself, but also the growth of people who were similar to their essence, to her essence, which were the kids, was trying to help herself and others to grow. So I would like to ask you a question. Please leave it in the comment section whether you had obstacles that stopped you from achieving a higher goal. How was it and how did you fight for what you really believed? And tell me your stories. I would be very interested to hear. Thanks very much for watching this video on the wisdom of Rumi. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I look forward to talking to you soon.